going to start out with a question this morning. Why are you here? You know, we start coming for many different reasons. I was like many of you here because I remember I started coming because my mother brought me. And when I was real young, I enjoyed church. You know, I think of many of the old brothers and sisters. I'm going to speak basically from Glassport, but I remember some from some of the other branches and missions too, that when I was young, they stood out as examples. Sometimes we followed that example, sometimes we didn't. Just like when we were growing up and our parents tried to drill it into our heads to do the right things, sometimes we listened, sometimes we didn't. You know, we wanted to do what we wanted to do, and we didn't want to pay attention to what our parents said. Eventually, we got to learn that they tried to teach us the right way. But why are you here today? Did you listen to any of the hymns that we sang this morning? I'm going to tell you why you're here, whether you think about it very much or not. Love. I came when I was young because my mom brought me. I knew from a young age, you know, I felt the church, this was the church, even from a young age. And I'm going to take a guess, 9 or 10 years old, I thought this was the right church. Because of the things I saw and experienced, I thought it was the right church. And if you would have tried to convince me otherwise, you would have had a problem, because I didn't want to hear it. It took me a while to ask for my baptism. Not as long as others, but I got to the point where I started to feel that love more and more. You know, they started to camp us when I was a teenager, and we didn't go right away because we didn't realize exactly what they were like or anything. And because it meant we had to travel wherever, even though that wasn't a problem. And then when we got the opportunity to go, we enjoyed it. I asked for my baptism at a camp. Not that it makes any difference, but that was the time. I came to the realization, and I felt that love so greatly within my life that I couldn't turn away again. I had felt God's touch several times over the years, and I liked it. I enjoyed it. I didn't think there was anything like it, and I still feel that way. Nothing like God's love. And I thought of this scripture this morning, and, well, for the last few days, and it's something that we've all heard. There's no doubt in my mind, we've all heard it many times. It's the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians, and it's Paul speaking. He says, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not charity, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could move mountains and have not charity, I am nothing. Paul uses some strong examples. How much faith would we have to be able to move a mountain? Well, I know that God can do anything. That's not a problem within my mind. But to ask him to move a mountain, do I have enough faith to do that? That's on me as an individual. Paul continues on, and he says, and though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, though I give my body to be burned and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing. You know, when you think of the world today, when they say charity, Paul just used one of their examples. Give to the poor. Take care of these people that can't take care of themselves, help them. And it's good. I mean, I don't know if you've ever done that to an individual or through an organization, but it makes you feel good, and it helps somebody. You know, many years I ran with the ambulance, and my doctor's one time I was talking with her, and she says, you do it and you don't get paid. I said, yeah. She says, she looked at me, she says, are you crazy? No. I did it because I wanted to help people. The little bit of training that I had to have, and when you think of the hours, you might go, ooh, that's a lot, but the training that I had to have taught me how to do certain things. You know, recently, especially with this football player going down on the field, and they did the CPR and everything. You know, there's been a lot on TV about doing CPR. And it helps. It gives somebody a chance. It doesn't mean that they're going to live. Whether you do it absolutely perfectly or not, it doesn't mean they're going to live. We don't know what God's plan is for anybody, but it gives them a chance. You give them a chance to maybe get someplace and get more help than we could give them. Paul, as he's talking about charity here, he mentions giving to the poor and all that. And he says, that's only a little part of it, basically. It says, charity suffereth long and is kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. He's saying a lot there. You think about it, there's a lot of meaning in what he just said. Then he continues on and says, charity never faileth. But whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. For we know a part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. Basically, he's saying charity is perfect. Think about it. What's charity? How do you describe it? What's the definition of charity? If you look in a dictionary, you're probably going to see a list. You know, it'll have them numbered there, this, and this. And that's all part of it. Think about it. What's Moroni say? Moroni says charity is the pure love of Christ. The pure love of God. What are you going to put up against that and say this is better? Nothing. You know, as Paul speaks here, he says about the things, you know, everything's going to fail except for charity. Think about it. How much do you know? Because he mentions knowledge. How much do you know? We're not all classified as geniuses. We don't all have a real high IQ, but we know things. You know, I saw a shirt I was looking that says, I fix things and I know things. You know, my natural job, I trained to be a machinist, and I took a job and I was in operating maintenance and I fixed things. Sometimes we would ask the operators how they broke the machine and they would say, I don't know what happened. When that happens, sometimes stuff just breaks. But most of the time it's because we did something and messed something up. I just got my car fixed. I got a light, a check engine light, and I took it, and it had to get inspected, and I took it, and I told them to find out what's wrong with it. And they said, well, we'll find out. He says, that's no problem. And they checked. He says, you got a leak. I says, what do you mean I got a leak? They said, there's a leak in your system someplace. It could be a vacuum line, it could be this, that, or the other. And when they checked further, they found out it was back where the gas pump is, on the gas tank. They had to drop the gas tank and find out what was wrong. And when I went to pick the car up, the guy said, it was nothing you did. I started laughing. I said, well, I didn't crawl under there and start beating on stuff. And he chuckled, because I wasn't going to get into that, but he knew what I was saying. I didn't do it. I couldn't have done that on purpose. It was just, the car's old, stuff started to rust, and it was in a place where I couldn't even see it. And I had to get it fixed. We don't know what's going to happen in our lives. When I was growing up, I didn't know what I was going to do. And if you would ask me how long I was going to live, I would have never expected this long. We did all kinds of things when we were young, and some of the things that we did weren't necessarily the most intelligent things, definitely weren't the safest, but we did them. We used to go out and swing on vines, and then somebody tied a bull rope up in the tree. The rope was a much better idea. But if we would have slipped and fallen, we could have got hurt. Our parents didn't see us. That was good for us, because they'd have said, stop that. But we climbed trees. It was part of our growing up. I have to laugh. My brother jumped out of a tree one time, and he got banged up a little bit, and he was young. My mom was talking to him. He says, if I'd have had my parachute, Mom, I wouldn't have got hurt. You think of these things. Well, he was only about 7 or 8 years old, so he didn't realize you had to be a lot higher than that for a parachute. But we do things and we say things throughout our life, and sometimes they're comical and sometimes they're not. As Paul says here, charity behaveth itself, doth not behave itself unseemly, nor seeketh her own. Why would charity seek its own? Like I said, Moroni says it's the pure love of God. Why would it stay only with God? Why did Jesus Christ come? He came that we would have the opportunity for our soul salvation. There's no other way. He says, therefore, we know in part, we prophesy in part, but when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. As I went through my trade, I learned how to run the various machines, to do various jobs, and some of them were very particular. We had to hold very tight tolerances, because it's needed in some places. Other places, not so much. But as we went through and we learned about this, we had our instructors. There was one guy designated as an instructor for each crew. And we had all the other machinists around us that if we had a problem, we could go ask them. It wasn't too often that we got, I don't know what you're going to do. Most of the time they could tell us and help us out. They didn't always have the answer, but they could tell us, try this, try that, and we learned. The instructors generally were the older guys. They had done all this work, and they knew what they were doing. You know, as an apprentice, I was young, I didn't know. I learned. I don't have anybody to teach, so I can't be the instructor anymore. But some of the work that I did is probably still in use, which doesn't matter in the least, but we know that we have to follow the plan that God laid out for us. Just like I had to follow the blueprints, we have to follow that plan. That plan is basically our blueprint for life. It doesn't have all the answers. God does. We're not going to be able to figure everything out, no matter how intelligent we are, how much we know, how much we can do. We can't do everything. I was talking with Sister Charlotte, and I said something about not being an electrician. I says, I can't do that job, I'm colorblind. And she chuckled. You know, when you're doing that job, you have to be able to see the colors of the wires. Now, I'm not real bad, but there are some colors, if I get them together, I look at them and I say, they would always give us these circles when we had our physical, and they'd say, what number do you see in there? Sometimes I could tell them. There were quite a few I looked at and I said, what number? And I remember one time I said that, the nurse looked at me like, just shook her head. And then another time they got a book out and they said, look at these. And they had a whole bunch of those. And they told me what colors I couldn't see, or couldn't tell the difference between, I should say. We can't do everything. God can. He sent his Son to give us the opportunity for eternal life. We don't know what's going to happen in our life. We don't know what obstacles we're going to face, what blessings, what trials, and sometimes our trials are blessings. You know, we can't ever tell until it's all said and done with. We go through the problems in our life and we look at it and we think, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And hopefully we know what to do. Pray. If praying for myself doesn't work, I ask, pray for me. You know, we heard that this morning. God has the answers. I don't. There's a lot of things I know in this life. I don't know everything. I can't give you all the answers. Certain things, maybe I could help you with. Other things, not a clue. When it comes to our health, you know, we go to see the doctors and the nurses, and they're trained for that. That's what they train for. I have some first aid knowledge. Maybe it'll help, maybe it won't. But God knows all things. When we go before God, anything is possible. Paul continues on there and says, when I was a child, I spake as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. When I became a man, I put away childish things. Hopefully we do that. You know, having Anthony around, he comes, he has his cars and stuff, and he has toys at our house, and he has toys at his house. And he likes to play with the cars. And he's got some little plastic trucks, and he takes them and he bangs them together. And then he looks at me and starts laughing because he knows I'm going to tell him, don't do that. Not so hard. And he'll laugh and he'll bang them together again. I know it's not going to hurt the toys. But he thinks because I'm telling him don't do it, that something's going to happen, and he just laughs at me. When we're little, we don't think the same way as when we grow up and become more educated, more knowledgeable. But how many times have you seen adults act like little kids at various points? Somebody thinks, oh, I know this or I know that, you got to treat me different. Show me where that's written down in the rules of life. It's not. You're not going to find that one. Treat people with respect. Okay, I accept that. Because they have more money than me, does that make them better than me? Nope. Because they have less money than me, does that make them worse than me? Nope. And guess what? I'm not the judge. I've been places and to people's homes, and when I see the things that they have or don't have, sometimes it bothers me. How could they live that way? You know, they don't have this, they don't have that, they don't have this. How could they live that way? We become used to what we have. We look at the way we live. Most of us have homes, some kind of transportation. We have clean water. We have heat in the winter. We have air conditioning in the summer to help us get through this stuff. I remember when I was young, we didn't have air conditioning. And in the summertime, it was bad. You know, my bedroom was upstairs. Guess where heat goes? So in the summertime, when it was hot, upstairs was still real warm even when it started to cool off outside. Now we had fans we would put in the window to try to get the heat out of the house or get the cool air in, depending on which way we had the fan blowing. But it was only something to help. Now, I don't care how hot it is outside, as long as that air conditioner's working, that heat doesn't bother me. When I was working, a lot of times they'd say, come on in the lunchroom, and I'd say no. Go in the lunchroom, we had air conditioning in there. We'd go out in the shop, out in the mill, no air conditioning. I didn't like going in and out like that, because when you went back out, it felt good when you went in. When you came back out in that heat and humidity, that didn't feel so good. So most of the time I would stay out. And they would say, what's the matter with you? Nothing. If they didn't understand, I wasn't going to try to explain it to them. It's all part of our life, our natural life. Jesus said, come to me. I'll take care of you. He didn't say we won't have any problems. He didn't say we wouldn't face obstacles in our life, but he said he'll take care of us. Why did he come? Because of the love that he had for each of us. Not just me, not just you, not just for any individual, but for all mankind. He came and gave his life for us. You know, we like to think that, you know, that's the greatest love that a man can have, is give his life for somebody. Guess what? If it wasn't for my family, if it wasn't my family, I don't know if I could do that quite as easy. You know, our family, we would do anything to keep them from getting hurt or injured or whatever. For somebody I don't know, I don't know what I would do. But guess what? I was a volunteer fireman. I ran with our ambulance when we had it. What did I do? Tried to help people I didn't know. God put that love in my heart to try and help people. And Paul continues on, he says, "For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know, even as also I am known. And now abideth faith, hope, and charity. But the greatest of these is charity." The pure love of God. We can't forget that. He continues to take care of us all through our lives. I know he watched over me when I was young, because if he didn't, I'm sure a lot of the times when I did stuff, I'd have been in deep trouble. I could give you one quick example. I was a teenager and we had a tree. It had these like little beans on it, and we would go get these and use them for a pea shooter. One day I was back there, I climbed up in this tree and I was picking some of these things. And all of a sudden I heard snap. No creaking, no cracking, just snap. And I was up about 15 or 20 feet. I was going down. And I landed on a branch from another tree. A dead branch. It was pretty big around. Face down. Knocked the wind out of me. And I was laying there, and when I could breathe again, I thought, oh man. Then I looked down and I says, ooh, that would have been bad. I already fell probably about 10 feet, but I had another 10 or so to go. And it might not have been as good as landing on that branch. At least on the branch, I hit right down the middle. If I'd have hit the hillside, I don't know how I would have landed or what would have happened, but it might not have been as good for me. God was watching over me and taking care of me. I didn't like the idea that I fell. I didn't like the idea that I landed on another branch. But I wasn't hurt bad. I didn't have to go get checked out. I didn't have to go to the hospital or the emergency room because I had a broken bone or stitches or anything. When I was young, I never broke any bones. But I had stitches, it seemed like every summer. From one thing or another, I got sewed up for this, I got sewed up for that. And I learned how to deal with it. But God was with me all the time. We're here because of that love he had for each and every one of us. It's not even the same as the love between a man and a woman, between their families. It's much greater, it's much deeper, and it provides so much more for us.
Your brother opened up with the question, why are we here? And the natural side, there are those reasons he mentioned, because he was raised here and brought here as a young person, and those are all part of your story. But at some point it becomes more than, or should become more than a habit, a ritual, what you do, but part of your life. And that's what he talked about. And as I was sitting there listening to him and reading through the scriptures, and I was kind of thinking back what might be a common conversation as we look towards this week and Valentine's Day and hearts everywhere, and the question of, why do you love me? And, there can be different levels of answers. But at some level, when you've been in a relationship and you've kind of gone through that process and built and rebuilt, there's an answer that's deeper than just because, well, I married you 25 years ago, so of course I love you. There's a deepness to that. And that's what our brother was talking about this morning, the deepness, and the word charity really kind of exemplifies that. It's not love. It is an unconditional, persevering type of love. It does not change or is not altered depending on the circumstances. When you think about love in that sense, and in a marriage, and you think about the change that occurs from day one to day, 15,000, there's a perseverance there, and there's a reason for that. And that's what our brother was talking about with charity. It is an absolute persevering type of love. When it says all those things here in the 13th chapter, suffereth long, kind, envieth not, vaunteth not, doth not behave itself unseemly, not easily provoked, thinketh no evil, rejoiceth not in iniquity. All these things are essentially saying it's a constant. It doesn't change. It's not malleable in that sense that it's going to react to a situation. It is. And that's why when they talk about, later, and now abideth faith and hope, charity, these three, but the greatest of these is charity. That's why. Because it does not change. Faith will. Faith will become knowledge. Faith is temporary. It's the start of a journey, but it does change. Hope. Hope is sustaining. It's important, but hope becomes reality. It changes. When you read that verse and you think about how is, well, I'm not going to disagree that charity is not greater than those, but how is it? Because it does not change. It is the pure, unconditional love of God. And its presence in your life will not change. It doesn't matter whether you accept it or not, it's still there. Faith is dependent upon your acceptance. It's incredibly important. It starts the journey, it makes the connection, but it will pass. Hope ultimately should come to fruition. We hope for many things naturally and spiritually in this life. We look forward to many things, and that in a lot of ways sustains us through the day-to-day. But there will be a time where hope ceases in a very positive way, but it will be gone. Charity will not. The pure love of God will not. And in part, to me it's always interesting when we begin to look at the spiritual and then reflect that into the natural. How difficult it is for me to wrap my mind around the fact that God is not in control and has not planned and perfected everything. Because our minds chemically, positively respond to love. We can talk about why that might be from a non-spiritual standpoint. But when I look at the scriptures and read how critical the pure love of God is, and see that many times in our own lives, That's what we crave. That's what we need. And at a deeper level, the physiological and chemical processes that occur when we both receive and give love are amazing. I mean, that feeds our brain. You know, oftentimes, tell people, well, if you're looking to get out of, go do something for someone. Why? Because that actually will release chemicals, dopamine, serotonin, positive things in our brain that will make us feel better. So when we read the scriptures about how sustaining love is, how important love is, I look at the body and think, sometimes that's just the answer. Sometimes it is about displaying or receiving. About that moment when you realize how much God truly loved you. If we were able to do an MRI, your brain would have been lighting up. We're wired this way for a reason. And God wants us to have joy. And these things and processes play out in a natural level. The cohesiveness of the family unit, the children yearning for love and receiving that and learning the importance of that. At a spiritual level, when we begin to understand the depth of that and the constant, unchanging presence of that. On a level of pathophysiology, that our bodies, and sometimes the inability to respond to that, is a disease. It's an abnormality, however you want to frame it. You have your normal bell curve of the way the mind responds, and then you have the other 5% in each direction that clinically needs to be treated. And yet somehow this isn't designed, but just happened. I can't believe that. The way the scripture talks about the importance of love, the way it manifests in our lives, the way our entire society sometimes mistakenly revolves around that. Maybe not understanding it fully or misunderstanding it, but the centerpiece it has on so many cultures. And yet you read the scriptures, you find the same thing. It is the centerpiece. It is the constant. From Abraham, the brother of Jared, Lehi, Solomon, Malachi, John, it's constant. It was present. It formed them. They molded their lives around it. And here we are today. Same thing. It's unchanging. We should desire to have and seek to have that pure love of God in our lives, molding us. Not us molding it around what we think it is, but understanding how present and solid it is to begin to mold ourselves around. That's what Paul's talking about. And how he says in the other, charity never faileth. And he talks about, prophecies that they fail. Well, more so, they'll be fulfilled. tongues, they'll stop. As the scripture says, whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. We know in part, we prophesy in part, and yet there is this singular constant, and it is the greatest of all. And so we should, as we ask that question, why am I here? Why do you love me? Because it is a constant. It has become real in your life. You can give reason after, ideally, give reason after reason why you're here. More so than just because, well, it's what I do on Sunday. No, we've molded our lives around the love of God. It has become an integral part of why I am here and sustained and am. It will never change. And hopefully I continue to mold myself around it. And as I do, my life is better. Not necessarily easy, not necessarily perfect. But when you go through that, you can do the same thing. When it talks about, what charity isn't, it suffereth long, it's kind, it's humble, it seeks out others, is stable, rejoiceth in good things, bearing all things, believing all things, hoping all things. That's why we're here, because that's what we desire in our life. Because we seek those things. And hopefully at some level, conscious more than unconscious, we recognize the only way that we can continue to have those things is if we continue to commune together, commune with God, and allow ourselves to be molded around that. So when you think about why you're here, let it be one simple thing. That there is something here you desire that is unchanging. That it feeds us, sustains us, that our bodies, our minds desire that to be filled. That's why we're here. And that pure love comes from only God. And it's reflected in us through Christ and His sacrifice. May God bless each and every one of you.
Turn to number 229. Saints.
We're going to open the meeting up this morning for testimony. And I just wanted to share this thought. Perhaps this morning sometimes I think, I don't have an experience to share or nothing to share this morning when you think of giving a testimony. But we read in the 15th chapter of John, and this is a verse I always think of when you think about the love of God. And Christ is speaking to his disciples. He says, "As the Father hath loved me, so have I loved you. Continue ye in my love. If ye keep my commandments, ye shall abide in my love, even as I have kept my Father's commandments, and abide in his love." And then he says, "These things I have spoken unto you, that my joy might remain in you, and that your joy might be full." And I think of that, it's more than just so you would know, that you would make it today, that you would survive. But it's much more than that. It reminds me of, there was a product that was sold maybe 5 or 6 years back. It was real popular. They might still sell it today. It was called Thrive. And maybe you've heard of it, maybe you've used it, I don't know. But it was a patch that you could put on your skin, on your arm, and it had some kind of electrolytes or vitamins or something in the patch, and it would make you feel energized. And there were a lot of people that used this, and they said they gave them energy, they made them feel good, and they were thriving when they used it. And when I think of this verse, I think of more than just living, more than just the day-to-day surviving, but really thriving in this life. When you're experiencing the joy of Christ. And it says, that he said that he shared these words with us, that his joy might remain in us, and that our joy might be full. And that's what his love can do for each of us. And so this afternoon, or at this point, we're going to open the meeting up for your testimonies, that maybe even if you would be able to share a moment in your life when you felt that joy in your heart, where it's just been full or overflowing, where the Lord has blessed you, where you felt that love within your own heart. So we'll open up at this time. May God bless you.